Okay.
Because I can't record
things...
until I'm made a co-host.
Yeah, no problem. I can record. It's not a problem. Yep.
You can record? Okay.
Yep, I can record.
Oh, you have it going?
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah. Excellent. All right.
All right, carry on.
Yeah. No problem. All right. So yeah. So afterwards, we'll have a 15-minute break, and then we'll have our second breakout session. So before this session will end, we'll have just a pop-up message just warning us that this session is coming to a close. So you can either click on to redirect yourself to the main room, or you'll just automatically go to the main room once the 45-minute is up. So for today, we'll be having a presentation by Jamie Burke. He's the Chief Administrative Officer of the town of Sackville. So it's about a 20-minute presentation, and then we'll be able to have group discussions. During the presentation, if there's any comments or questions, we ask that they please be typed in the chat box. I'll be monitoring the chat box. So once Jamie's done his presentation, I'll be able to ask him the questions. Jamie, I'm not sure if there's something else you want to add before starting.
No, that's great. You just let me know when you want me to share my screen and we can get going.
All right. Yeah, I'm good. So yeah, you can start sharing.
Just let me know, Julie, when you can see that.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
So thank you, Julie, and welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today, and it's always a pleasure to talk about green infrastructure. And today I'm going to be specifically talking about the communications plan that we use as part of our first naturalized stormwater retention pond here in Sackville. Just bear with me till I get the... Is that okay? Slide deck's changing? Okay, great. So just a brief overview of the layout of the presentation. I'll talk first about, the problem that we had to solve. I'll move on to the project that we rolled out in terms of a solution and our approach to social media, which is really going to be the key point today. I'll talk a bit about the challenges that we encountered with our stormwater retention pond. And then lastly, we'll focus on some takeaways or some lessons learned that you can hopefully take away to your own community. So it's my understanding that not everybody on the call is from New Brunswick. So just to put things into context of where Sackville, New Brunswick is, we're basically on the border with Nova Scotia. We're about a half an hour southeast of the city of Moncton. We're a community of 5,300 people, and we're home to Mount Allison University. So Mount Allison is regularly recognized as the primary #1 undergraduate university in the country. So it's our own little, we refer to it as our own little Harvard right here in Sackville. So our population base does not include the 2,100 to 2,300 students that flood in every September to Mount A. So in terms of the community, just to put to share some local context, you can see the university on the left-hand side of the screen, the campus. You can see the football field towards the left of the red circle. And when I'm talking about, you're going to hear me refer to Lawrence Street several times in the next 20 minutes or so. And really, it's this area within the red circle is the area of the community that I'm specifically referring to. So to the south of this image is the main CN rail line that kind of dissects the southern boundary of the site. Towards the top portion of the circle is Bridge Street. It's our downtown just to the left of the circle. And that's Lawrence Street running north-south on the main image through the boundary of a portion of the marsh. So this is literally the lowest area of our drainage basin here in Sackville. So we have you'll see shortly, we have a tremendous amount of water coming into this area that we need to manage. So I don't think there's any surprises of what people may be guessing what our problem is. It's flooding, and we've seen these are some images from the 1960s when we've had some very significant floods here in Sackville. But since 2014, since I joined the town, we've had regular and consistent flooding. We had several major floods in 2014. And really we got to a point where our councilors were getting flooded with concerns and from citizens asking us to do something about it. We had businesses flooded, so we obviously had some inquiries and pressure coming from the business community. Within this area, we have some vulnerable populations like the Royal Canadian Legion. We also have regular businesses, the Cookie Cutter Bakery, Bowser's Construction, and our own sports and recreation facilities are within this drainage basin, unfortunately. So in 2014, we had a significant amount of flooding. And when I refer to flooding today, I'm specifically referring to freshwater flooding. We hear a lot of talk in the climate change world about sea level rise and inundation of our coastal environments. Here in Sackville, we're surrounded by abattoirs, which I'll talk about. But for this particular project, it was all about managing stormwater, so fresh water, how that fresh water moves throughout the community and ends up within that red circle. So all of these red arrows are kind of showing the way that fresh water and surface water moves to that lowest part of the drainage basin. And it's literally thousands of square kilometers of area that's all finding its way down to this lowest part of the town. And we're vulnerable for freshwater flooding, but you may have heard in recent media releases about the Chignecto Isthmus study, which is taking place between Allac and Sackville about what needs to be done to protect and rebuild the abattoirs. That's really a separate issue. So that's kind of rebuilding the dikes to protect us from sea level rise, where the project that I'm talking about today is solely focused on managing freshwater flooding. So I'll talk a bit about the challenges, I guess, of our local context and what that specifically means. And the images that you're seeing here are abattoirs. I don't think I need to explain what these things, this Acadian engineering of how this functions, but in short, it's like a check valve, right? When the tide is in, that metal gate that you see on the right-hand side is shut because the water is closing that gate. When the tide is out, the head or the pressure from the water, the fresh water that we have behind the dike, pushes that gate open that allows our fresh water to get out to sea. So the dikes they're protecting us from sea level rise, but they also limit our ability to be able to get fresh water out of the community and out to sea. So our problem has been storage, right? When we get that snow melt, we get that 100-year storm or even close to it. Our Lawrence Street area was flooding regularly and consistently. So what we needed to do was find a place to put the water. And before I get to that, just quickly, I guess the tipping point for us was, I spoke a bit about the pressures that our community was facing from regular flooding, but in 2014, close to 15, we received enough rain that had flooded the CN tracks. And CN actually dispatched a crew to walk in front of the locomotive safely through the community. So our phones started ringing, our legal team's phone started ringing, our lawyers talked to CN's lawyers, and finally we said something has to be done. So that's when we really looked to find what the sustainable solution for our small community would be. And think of it as a bucket or a bathtub, that the water needs to be stored somewhere so we can hold that water and manage it in a strategic way and allow the tide to do its thing. So we can flush that fresh water out only when the tide is out, unless we want to invest in major pumps and pump it over the top of the dike. So what we decided to do was we embarked on a major plan, and I don't think I need to tell anybody on the call here today that these types of projects are extremely expensive. So our individual project, we broke up into two initial phases. Phase one of the project was mainly underground infrastructure, so ensuring that the pipes leading to and within the Lawrence Street area were adequate to be able to handle the volume of water that we were dealing with. And then phase two was really about building that bathtub or bucket and finding the place for the water to be stored. So phase one, $5.4 million. Phase two, $3 million. So we're talking a community of 5,300 people with an annual operating budget of $11 million, an annual capital budget of $1.2 million. So it's unrealistic to expect small communities to be able to do this on their own, just simply from a cost perspective, not to mention capacity, expertise, etc. So this was our kind of our Cadillac model. This is what we tendered in phase 2. So we were looking to build 2 stormwater retention ponds. The little kind of polygon shape you see at the top of the drawing that's shaded in gray was a project we were undertaking with Ducks Unlimited Canada as a bit of stormwater retention and a bit of conservation. But we went out to tender to build 2 ponds and a major ditch to take the water, redirect the water from kind of the bottom part of the image down. I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but down along the south of the image, and take that water out to the extreme right, just to the north of our sewage lagoons. So we put that project out to tender, and you know what? It came back at $6 million, and we had 3. So the tender price came back high for a variety of reasons. The project was being undertaken in the lowest area of the drainage basin. It's all marsh mud. Companies were not comfortable moving heavy equipment in and out of that area. Part of the project included a new abattoir, which was going to be lowered to get us some additional elevation to help the water move. That required sheet piling, additional insurance and liability on behalf of the companies that were building. So to make a long story short, we had to go back to the drawing board. And this is not something that we're ashamed of, but looking back, was our project a bit ambitious? Probably, certainly from a cost perspective, but what we had to do as a small community is work with our consultants at Crandall Engineering, which is now Englobe, to kind of redefine, I guess, the scope of the project and scale back to find something that would still meet the long-term objective, which was that Cadillac model to redirect the drainage basin and get the water out to a part of the Tantramar River that would not silt up, but still be able to provide some amount of storage, right? Because the overlying issue is that we need a bathtub to hold that water. So overall, we need 100,000 cubic meters of storage, and we had enough money to build 40,000 cubic meters. So we still have a ways to go. So the way we've approached this long-term stormwater management project is to break it up in phases. And I think moving forward for small communities, that's certainly something that we here at the town would strongly suggest. So this was when we finally settled on determining what it is that we could do with the money that we had. We leveraged money through the federal and provincial governments through the Clean Water and Wastewater Fund. So we received 75 cent dollars, which certainly makes the project more economical. But at the end of the day, we settled on building a naturalized stormwater retention pond. That was really what we set out to do. So getting storage, but doing it in a new, innovative, and green way. So this was new for us. It was something that we hadn't done before. So I'm going to kind of switch gears now and really focus on the communications aspect that we really had to dial in and help sell the project to not just our councilors, but to the community. So we all know when we're doing something new, whether it's enacting a new seatbelt bylaw requirement to tell people they need to buckle up, or telling people they can't smoke in restaurants, people generally get on the defensive and they don't deal with change very well. It's the same case here in Sackville with respect to our first naturalized pond. This was something new, and we figured out very quickly in the process that we needed a way to get out ahead of some of the negativity and negative conversations that were happening about, climate change isn't happening. This is a waste of money. You don't need it. This isn't the right place to do it. So I guess we made a conscious decision to communicate the project in a very different way for government. We tend to be, put on that professional persona, suit jackets and ties and no humor and just be, kind of straight laced and tell it as it is. But in this case, we took a very different communication style approach where we literally wrote a blog. We updated it every 2 weeks in consultation with our engineering team. And literally, it is a regularly updated website or webpage. And it's written in an informal and conversational style, which is not how governments write, right? Like we write bylaws and legal documents, and we run business meetings through council meetings. Like there's no real informal procedure or even like conversation built into the way we do our business. So this was really a change in communications tactics for us as a municipal government. So this is what we did. We committed to it. We provided an update on our website in one spot where it was all housed every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks we would sit down and kind of write the story of what the contractor was doing, what residents could expect in terms of construction, noise, road closures, excavation, truck traffic, etc. So we spend a considerable amount of time anticipating what residents may want to know, and then telling it as a story rather than kind of an in-your-face kind of, more of a typical government type of press release. So obviously there's some obstacles that we ran into along the way, particularly with respect to the communications procedures that we use. And that's really what I want to talk about as we move along. So this being a new project, we tried our best to anticipate what some of the questions and concerns may be, but I wouldn't have expected people to say there would be a fear of drowning in a naturalized stormwater retention pond. We have a lake with a beach. We have a waterfowl park, which has boardwalks all the way through it. Nobody ever raises concerns about people's safety with respect to those areas. But people, for some reason, thought that residents may drown in the retention pond. Similarly, I definitely did not appreciate how much people were going to talk about mosquitoes. My God, I can't even sit on my back deck without the mosquitoes wanting to carry me away as it was before the retention pond. So for people to say that we were going to make the mosquito population worse was literally just based on people assuming the worst, right? So we had to come up with the sound responses to ensure that we had the right answers, right? So people won't drown. No, they're not going to drown because it's going to be naturalized around the edge, right? There's going to be a soft edge with cattails. So people are not going to want to wander or feel like they're going to be invited into the wet areas of the pond. The pond was designed in a way so that the main channel is over 1 meter deep, right? That's not what mosquitoes breed in, right? And that was specifically designed so that the nominal water level would be at a depth that wouldn't be a place where mosquitoes wanted to breed. The other thing we did, because it was new, is that we made a very conscious effort to be able to show people as reasonably as possible what they may expect when it's finished. And we did this through, architectural renderings, which we typically see on urban type planning projects in major cities, not so much in rural areas. But we committed to do this because we wanted people to see, but we also wanted the images to be true. So we didn't want to get burned by people coming back to say, well, hold on a second. You said you were going to do this and you were going to build this. You showed us this, and this isn't what you did. So we reminded people that these were architectural renderings, they were conceptual drawings, but still there was a high level of accountability to them when we released them to the public. So all of this was meant to build awareness and kind of build on that public education piece of the project being new. And I can't stress how important that is from a communication perspective of how you need to sell this, not just to your decision makers, but also to your residents, to other professionals, to regulators. This is still something new that people have a hard time understanding. So I think you are going to have to invest a considerable amount of time in thinking about how you're going to strategically communicate the project to a variety of different stakeholders. And I really can't stress that enough. So these are a few of the images that we included with the blog. So we regularly took photographs of the machinery doing the work and explained to residents what exactly the equipment was doing at any given time and where they could expect the machinery to move around the site, and anticipating people's questions. And then we tried to have that bit of fun, right? So we did some time-lapse videos that we shared on social media you know, with titles like work, work, work. Like we're typically not working at this time of year. Like you can see the steam coming up from the ground, like the ground is frozen. You know, I'll talk a bit about one of the challenges that specifically creates for these types of projects during winter construction. So these were all kind of new tactics that we hadn't used before as part of our communications portfolio. And then you're going to have your local experts. Every community has them. Every community has these people who just want to nitpick. They have lots of time on their hands. They have no problem pointing out the shortfalls of a project, no matter how great it is. That's their seems to be their sole purpose in life. And there's some tactful communications tools that you can use to help combat that those suggestions. But I call them the haters. They don't care about what the solution is. They're just angry, and there's nothing you can say that's going to win them over. They don't agree with logic. They don't use logic in the reasoning. You can tell them that this is the lowest part of the drainage basin. This is the only place that this pond will work, and they'll disagree with that, even though it's based on sound engineering principles. So they're looking for attention, right? There's this idea of know-it-allism, and they're smarter than you, and they don't care about you, but they will eventually lose interest and move on to something else. And as the communications professional, or if you're working with a communications team, you just need to be mindful that they're probably being a pain on other sites too. It's not just your project that they're specifically picking on. So you need to keep that in mind. But you do need to prepare for, the negativity, and you need to anticipate it. You need to stay late and be able to craft, clever and strategic messaging that's going to be able to combat some of these headlines that are going to appear in local news. So we did have some contaminated soil, given that it was on an old CN site. That created cost to run a little bit higher than we anticipated. But we kept our council, we kept our community in the know the entire time. We provided factual information. As soon as we were in a position to release that information, we did, in an effort to kind of get ahead of this negative storyline that ends up getting worse through, whispering rumors. We all know what the comment section on Facebook can look like. It's just downright nauseous. But you need to be mindful of those things. You need to stay ahead of them, because the minute that snowball starts to form, and you get behind a group or kind of slew of comments, you end up having a long way to kind of dig your heels in to kind of pull back and create some credibility for the project. But one of the things that we probably didn't realize going in as much as I wish we should have or could have, is that social media is self-regulating to a certain degree. So if you're out there telling your story in a transparent, honest, and open way, there are people in your community who will come to your defense and who will comment on inappropriate comments so that you don't have to. And that ends up building kind of this citizen ammunition to help combat some of the negativity on a project. And that really was really, really important for our project. So just moving to the lessons learned that I hope something you can take away to some of your own communities. I'm really focused on the communications aspect. If there's other questions or comments about the project, I'm more than happy to answer those in the Q&A at the end. But I really think that the communications examples that we took away from this project are the ones that I think are most valuable. So first off, don't assume that people know what you mean, especially when you're dealing with a complicated engineering project. You need to assume nothing, and you need to be able to explain this in plain language. You need to meet with the engineering team and then boil that down into plain language. And then one of the things that I've personally relied on is this option in Microsoft Word that it's called read aloud. It's a clever little tool. It just reads the paragraph back to you. And you can then sit and listen to somebody narrating what you just wrote back to you. And you can put yourself in the position of residents and say, okay, are residents going to understand what I've written? Or do I need to change the messaging or tone, or use even clear language to ensure that my message doesn't get lost? That's a really, really, really crucial tool. It also catches your typos. So you need to I would suggest that you spend some time anticipating the questions and coming up with ways to address them. Don't wait for people to ask the questions. Spend some time with the team going through what people could reasonably ask. We'll all have controversial issues, but what we need to do as communicators and as professionals to get out ahead of them. Don't wait for the media to cover the stories or for rumors to spread on social media, which just makes things worse. Try to put your communications out before the media gets a chance to do their thing. And if you're being honest and you're using facts, you can't get yourself in trouble. You're always in a safe space by being open and transparent. But you got to commit to it, right? If you say you're going to do it every 2 weeks, you got to do it every 2 weeks. And that's a commitment that you need to make to the citizens, and that you need to make to the team who you're helping to communicate on their behalf. We use good photographs, and we documented every piece of the project along the way. So every time we updated the blog, we tended to use new imagery, good, powerful imagery to help communicate what we were trying to convey to the audience. And you need to monitor it. Some larger municipalities will use monitoring software like Hootsuite. We don't. We still troll social media sites, so you need to be careful where you respond. We typically do not respond on other people's social media pages. We only respond on our own page, and that kind of keeps things within the metes and bounds of a social media context. I think that's really important. Always go back to what your messaging is. It's no different than when you prepare for an interview. You've got your core messaging. No matter how much those reporters, journalists, residents want to get you off your key messages, you need to go back to that core messaging. And for us, we use kind of a base camp. So all of our blog was contained on our website. So we only had to update to one spot. We didn't have to keep jumping around to different sites to make sure the information was consistent. We had one single point of entry that we had to worry about. And then the last two, engagement, have some fun with it. Don't be scared to use some humor. If you ask some youth about, what they don't like about municipal government messaging, they'll say that it's dry, that it's not funny. So it's okay to be humor as long as you use it in a professional way to help engage your audience. And then lastly, you can't take it personal. Sometimes you just need to grab your shield and go home and pour a drink, because as soon as you think, it's going to get worse, sometimes the circumstances change. Here in Sackville, we were talking about contaminated soil one day, and the next day we were talking about putting an armored vehicle in one of our parks, and that blew up in less than 24 hours. So it will eventually cycle out and move on, and then eventually you'll be able to really focus on kind of championing and getting behind the real positive attributes of the project that really become what your community wants, and what you've been communicating with them along the entire way, but why you're actually looking to build this and create an asset for the community. So if we tried to pull this out of the community now, it would not go over well. We've seen a considerable amount of wildlife, birds, shorebirds, frogs, a variety of birds moving in immediately. We have time-lapse cameras up to capture the growth that's happening. We have Mount Allison University classes here on a regular basis. We have Marshview Middle School classes here on a regular basis. So it's really been a success, and certainly over the course of my career, one of the standout projects that I've had the opportunity to work on. So I know that's a bit like drinking through the end of a fire hose, but I hope those are some valuable communications tools that you can take away to your community, no matter how big or small it is. I think these lessons apply across the board. So Julie, I'll turn it over to you for questions, if that's okay. I have no idea. I forgot to turn my timer on, so I have no idea where I am time-wise.
Yes, we're about 6 minutes. So there's 6 minutes left for discussions. Yeah, during the presentation, great presentation, by the way, Jamie, thank you so much. Yeah, the chat box was pretty quiet. I don't know if anyone has questions or comments. Maybe talk about personal experience, projects you've worked with, things that you've done that seems to be working for communication. So anybody that wants to add something in, just unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hey, Jamie, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. I'm just wondering, I work obviously for a nonprofit, and I'm wondering about your perspective about taking the conversation the other way. So you're using the nonprofit and taking the conversation and trying to convince our municipalities to engage more readily in some of the green infrastructure and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think the nonprofits are there to help you champion projects. You know, we're here in Sackville. We're really fortunate to have EOS Eco Energy. You know, we've established a great relationship with the New Brunswick Environmental Network. So I think we need to rely on those groups who are already out there doing a lot of the grassroots organization and selling and public awareness and education, and use those to help sell projects, to help build community support for these types of projects, which are very difficult to get off the ground.
So as a municipal, I guess, staffer, do you find that there is value then for the nonprofits to really promote themselves as that communications link between the municipality and the public then?
Yeah, 100%. Definitely. I mean, you know, one of the things that we did is we would take the information back from the engineering team, and then it wouldn't be unusual for us to have a call with, you know, some go-to people at some of the nonprofit organizations, just to bounce some messaging off them, you know, and using that to our advantage, so that we knew that what we were going to be saying would be something that we could get support for. So no, definitely some value in nonprofits. There's no question about it.
Thanks.
It was to get federal funding for the project.
So I think I heard the question. Was the question how long it took to get federal funding?
Yes, sorry. Yes, how long of a process it was to get the federal funding for the project?
I think for us it was good timing. We applied for phase one through a different funding program, and then we were advised that there was money available for phase two. So for us, it was no problem at all. Our phase three project is a bit of a different story. So as I mentioned, we built 40,000 cubic meters of storage. We're still 60 short. We basically have a shovel-ready project ready to go, but we haven't been successful to be able to find that federal provincial money to be able to undertake phase three. So I think a lot of it just depends on timing, depends on priorities of what the federal and provincial government are. In the last round of federal provincial funding formulas, it was focused on water quality, which, you know, rightfully so. Not everything can go to stormwater management. So a lot of times it may take a bit of time to, you know, get your project to a state of readiness where you're in a position to apply. And that's really timing that you can use to, you know, build that grassroots support with some of the nonprofits, with your counselors, with some of your colleagues, to kind of get your project into a point where you're ready to apply for a federal infrastructure program. But it can certainly take some time.
Thank you.
We still have about 2 minutes before we get booted out. So if anyone want to ask anything, here's your chance.
Are there any engineers on the line?
Yep.
And I guess when you approach these types of projects, is communication something that you're looking to partner on with the client, or in this case, maybe a municipality or a small rural area? Or are you just kind of going about your work, kind of drafting your plans and putting in an execution and delivery schedule?
I haven't been involved, I guess, on the communication side, but I know we've had a few projects with government funding where we do work with the municipality pretty closely to help them draft their communication plans and work through the project.
But I mean, that's good and comforting to hear, I guess. And you know, I would encourage the engineers, if you're working for a firm and you get partnered up with a municipality, nonprofit, or or other agency to really bump the communications aspect up, you know, to give some consideration to a communications plan as part of the project. And then, you know, similarly, if you're the nonprofit group in a municipality, to reach out to those municipalities and help kind of collaborate on a communications plan for a project that you think has value to the community in which you're working in or region.
Okay. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Jamie. We're just about under a minute before we need to leave. So yeah, we just want to thank everybody for their participation. Thank you, Jamie, for the wonderful presentation.
You're welcome. Thanks everybody for attending.